So from time to time, we will hear from the president of Nintendo of America, Doug Bowser, in different interviews. However, it is pretty sporadic, and it's not necessarily as out there as we had with, say, Reggie Fils-Aimé. Doug Bowser feels like more of a behind-the-scenes kind of guy, and he sort of just steps out into the spotlight on occasion. But when he does, people tend to listen and pay attention to see what he has to say. And in a recent interview with Inverse, he was asked about some of the recent rumors and talks around Nintendo's next generation device, and he decided to drop a little bit more information that certainly has gotten a response online around backwards compatibility, when the system's coming out, and more. So I figured we would hang out and check out this interview here today and see exactly what he said. So if you guys enjoy this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new. So let's start by jumping over here to inverse.com. We can see Doug Bowser here at the top, front and center. And he was asked many questions in this interview. I'm not going to go over every single one, but what I will do is link to this interview down below in the description so you can kind of read through it for yourself and go over every single thing. But a few things I wanted to point out here starts actually right at the top when it comes to crunch in an industry that is known for it. And how do you think the development team's approach affected the final product of Super Mario Bros. Wonder, as the producer said that it wasn't developed with a deadline in mind until much later in development. So it sounds like they just had a lot of time to come up with ideas in pre-production and just sort of figure out the structure for a new 2D Mario game. And as we've had many 2D Mario games in the past several decades, coming up with something really new for that setup, that genre, it's kind of difficult. So in this case, having the extra time to collaborate and figure things out seems to have paid off with the high quality nature of the game. But he does say one thing with Nintendo development is we don't pressure our teams to deliver within a certain window. If they need more time, they'll take more time. And the reason for that is our players have an expectation of the quality that our games will bring. We want to make sure we respect that and deliver those wow moments. And this is something I will say about Nintendo's games. Even though they might come out and visually speaking, the resolution might be lower, the frame rate might not be the greatest at times, I will at least give them credit in the sense that their games don't really come out broken or buggy or glitched or any of that. Even a game like Tears of the Kingdom that should just constantly be breaking with a lot of physics it's doing in an open world, it works great. It's to the point where people are continuously discovering things because they can't seem to break the game. So that, I get it, makes sense. If it needs more time, it gets more time. I'm thinking of Animal Crossing as a more public example where that game did get delayed, and Doug Bowser himself said, hey, it's either they have to crunch or we just have to delay it and give them more time. So we delayed it and they can get more time. And I mean, look how that title went on to produce 40 some odd million copies sold. So seems like they made the right move. He also gave many non-answers, like this one about Super Mario Bros. Wonder. It's the first 2D platform in the series in over a decade, receiving widespread acclaim, which, if you remember, we've had new Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. They didn't even take the U out of the title, but they say this return to roots approach has also worked with Metroid Dread. Right? Is this something that Nintendo would consider doing with franchises such as Legend of Zelda, going back to, as they say, basics, but that more traditional Zelda format? He gave a pretty serious non-answer, saying that I think what's important is that the development teams have that opportunity to really understand what they want to build and the type of game they want to create, whether that's a reinvention of the classic game or going in a whole new direction. We really do give our dev teams a lot of leeway to decide where they want to go with future game development. So who knows with Legend of Zelda at this point. I feel like because the market is speaking to Nintendo that they want more open world Zelda games, that's just the way the franchise is going to go at this point, which for me, I still really like the traditional Zelda game with a kind of a set order, with dungeons and really just being these closed off kind of puzzles at each dungeon to figure out. There's a certain satisfaction there, I think, to conquering each one. Maybe they continue doing them as like the side projects, something like how we had Link's Awakening getting a remake. They can go back and do a remake of Oracle of Ages, Seasons, Minish Cap, sure. Or they can do a brand new game kind of in one of those series like we got Link Between Worlds on the 3DS. But when it comes to dumping probably hundred some odd $1 million and 6+ years into a game like we see with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, I think those games are going to stay in that structure, be more open-ended, and they'll continue building on that. This was an interesting answer here, and it had to do with Nintendo preparing to open a museum, and asked about the company when it comes to preservation of its history and games for global audiences. He starts out by saying, "We really do consider ourselves to be more of an entertainment company than just a dedicated video game company," which is interesting because for a long time, we have just seen Nintendo as a dedicated video game company. However, Doug Bowser has said it multiple times that they are an entertainment company. So interesting to think about kind of the direction that Nintendo has gone in and how they've been growing outside of video games a lot over the last 10 years. He mentions Super Nintendo World. He mentions the Super Mario Brothers movie, and obviously their successful game launches. But when you look at Super Nintendo World, that they continue to open more and more of these theme parks, they're doing very, very well. And then you look at the Super Mario Brothers movie, where they partnered with Illumination, and they've made over $1 billion at the box office. Yeah, the pressure does kind of come off of the need for having these massive sellers with video games in the future. Now, they don't have a problem selling video games now at all. It's still their strength, but you never know what the future could hold 20 or 30 years from now. And I think Nintendo really looking outside of games currently and taking advantage of their strong franchises and intellectual properties, it makes sense. But I still think we're going to see everything still center around their game system and their video games. But Mario is getting to a position where it's incredibly strong with the mainstream, who maybe don't even really play any games. They know Mario. It's like the Mickey Mouse of video games, and Nintendo can hang their hat on it and make a lot of money outside of just selling video games. Oh, and he did answer anyone out there who is hoping for some sort of preservation to be able to access these older games. Yeah, use Nintendo Switch Online subscription and the expansion pack. That's the way to do it. Just subscribe to their service. Don't worry about buying them separately. Just subscribe. And if not, hey, they're always in the aftermarket used for hundreds of dollars. Doug Bowser also responded to what was going on with Microsoft and the FTC and some of the documents that leaked out, which I got to give Inverse credit here. They did ask the questions that I think a lot of people would have wanted them to. These weren't really softball questions necessarily. So Doug Bowser had to do a lot of dancing and bobbing and weaving and dodging with PR statements. Like the leaks from Federal Trade Commission versus Microsoft trial revealed Microsoft had discussions about acquiring Nintendo. I'm not really asking you about why that would or wouldn't happen, but more broadly, what do you think about the growing trend of acquisitions and what its effect on the industry has been and will continue to be going forward? Now, he does say that they have a great relationship with Microsoft. We consider them to be partners in many, many ways, and you only have to look at Nintendo Switch to see that partnership. Obviously, Minecraft is on Nintendo Switch, and we brought Banjo-Kazooie to Smash Bros. Ultimate, so we're looking forward to that partnership continuing. So, interesting stuff there going forward. I could be talking about updates for Minecraft, but who knows? There could be other plans in the future with crossovers between Nintendo and Microsoft, whether it's Nintendo using maybe Microsoft's Azure servers, or maybe there's a future where Game Pass finds its way onto a Nintendo platform someday. I'm thinking way into the future, 10, 15, 20 years, who knows? But he was also asked about consolidation, considering that's the entire court case was around with the FTC versus Microsoft, was Activision Blizzard being acquired by Microsoft. And interestingly enough, Doug Bowser does not have a problem with any of that. And I guess that shouldn't be too shocking because he doesn't want to say, yeah, we don't like consolidation. That should not be in the industry. We're also buying next level games. Well, there's always the chance that Nintendo could end up acquiring more and more studios. They have been doing this quietly behind the scenes, and there are smaller ones. There was one that was basically still in their building, the company that they acquired. It was very, very small, but like next level games, that's technically an acquisition. And there are many studios that work very closely to Nintendo right now. Some people think that Nintendo owns HAL Laboratory, as an example. Some think that they own Intelligent Systems, and they don't. But they could someday if, for example, one of those companies wanted to sell, and they go to Nintendo and say, hey, we're going to give you first shot at it, but if you don't want to buy us, we're looking elsewhere. And then Nintendo probably doesn't want to put that relationship at risk. They would go to acquire. So it makes sense that Doug Bowser says something like, so as consolidation happens on an equal basis, we're seeing these new studios which really just speaks to the dynamic nature of the industry overall. In the end, this bodes well for the player. So there you go. Doug Bowser thinks consolidation is good for the player because studios will continue to pop up as we go along to kind of fill in the gaps where some of those larger companies are being acquired. And we do see this where when there's an acquisition that happens, generally staff, whether it's people who run the studios at the top or just developers in general, leave. They end up going off and forming their own studio. This happened recently with Microsoft and Playground, where some of the key figureheads there went off and made, I believe, Maverick. So that is something that will continue to happen. And at this point, it's easier than ever to distribute games to the players. So yeah, you're probably going to see more and more of these indie developers, these studios that are very small, come up with some really impressive games, and it's going to blur the line between like quote unquote AA and AAA. And finally, this was the big question that made a lot of headlines out there because it has to do with Nintendo and their next generation device. They asked, there have been reports that Nintendo showed off a successor to the Switch behind closed doors during Gamescom. As we've discussed, the Switch has had a long lifespan and a huge install base. How, when you consider the idea of the successor to the Switch, do you think about helping those people who are on the console transfer to the next platform while reassuring them that the content investment in the Switch will somehow transfer to a successor? Good question, because that question centers around backwards compatibility, and we all want some sort of acknowledgement, confirmation, something from Nintendo that it will be backwards compatible. And I will admit, I do think it's a little odd that they still have not mentioned anything about that. And we are just about November. I believe a year from now, we'll probably have the next system in our hands. So you feel like Nintendo may want to instill some confidence in this. And hey, great opportunity for Doug Bowser to do it right here, except Nintendo America, more of a marketing arm than... well, an arm that would answer this question. He says, well, first, I can't comment, or I won't comment, I should say, on the rumors that are out there. But one thing we've done with the Switch to help with that communication and transition is the formation of the Nintendo account. In the past, every device we transitioned to had a whole new account system. Creating the Nintendo account will allow us to communicate with our players if and when we make a transition to a new platform to help ease that process or transition. It's very odd that he says if and when, like, obviously, there will be does anyone think there won't be a next system? We're just going to have the Switch in 2040. Anyway, he says, our goal is to minimize the dip you typically see in the last year of one cycle and the beginning of another. I can't speak to the possible features of a new platform, but the Nintendo account is a strong basis for having that communication as we make the transition. So after this article went up, this is the response that made headlines for backwards compatibility confirmed. Also seemed to somehow make the rounds that the next system is confirmed to be launching in 2024. Look, I think it is coming out next year. I do. But I don't see anything here that says backwards compatibility confirmed, 2024 confirmed. What I see here is him doubling down on the idea that the Nintendo account exists the way it does now, so that we can carry it forward to the next system. We've seen that chart that's been going around for years now, as it was shared by Nintendo themselves with investors, showcasing that this Nintendo account that they have now created is different than what we've had in the past, where your digital purchases were basically linked to your system. And in order to transfer from one to the next, you had to do a whole transfer process, like from the Wii to the Wii U. It was really annoying to deal with. And in this case, it does appear that we will be signing in with our Nintendo account on the next platform, and something like the Nintendo Switch Online service with that N64 application, Genesis, Super Nintendo, we assume that will carry over. I think that's pretty straightforward. And your save data with cloud saves will probably follow you as well. The question that we all still have, will all of our digital purchases that we've made currently on the Switch work on the next system? Will there be backwards compatibility? He didn't answer any of that here, which is, again, very unfortunate. I do think we're getting pretty close to Nintendo preparing, I'll say, to make an announcement of some kind. Not necessarily that, oh, this is what the system looks like, here's our plan, and we'll see you next year. I wouldn't be shocked if Nintendo dropped a bit more of a hint necessarily, maybe to investors coming up in the next couple of weeks, that, hey, we have everything under control for this next system. We figured out that these games will go over and we'll talk more about it next year. And you might be wondering, when would they do this? Because I'm mentioning in a couple of weeks. Well, that would be at their 6 months earning release. That's on November 7th. They have their IR calendar right here with Investors Relations. And you can look last year in 2022, they did the financial results briefing and corporate management policy briefing. This was online, as you can see, the following day. I would expect something like that in that week. So November 7th is when the release happens, probably November 8th. And they'll probably answer some questions around the idea of what's coming up, because they already have an idea as to what we're looking at right now with their fiscal year projections being 15 million systems. But what do we do after that? Because that's how investors are looking. They're looking years into the future. Not right now. They want to know if something is coming up that they should be planning for around their investments. And Nintendo, they might want to drop a little hint. I mean, at this point, I feel like most people have figured out if they are buying a Switch here in the next month or two for the holidays or something. And I don't think them just saying, hey, we got a plan, we got a strategy, there is a system coming up here soon, just kind of reference it a bit more to put some of the investors maybe at ease, as this is a question that continues to come up. So that would be the next time I would expect Nintendo to mention anything else about this. Look towards that week of November 7th, November 8th, to see if anything comes up. But either way, I believe we'll get into next year, probably in that first quarter. Nintendo will start to talk, they'll show off the next system, and then I think we'll be on the road to, we'll say, the Switch 2 right now, releasing maybe October or November 2024. But it's going to be a fun year. Next year is what I'm thinking. But let me know what you guys think about this down below with Doug Bowser and this interview around leaks from the FTC and Microsoft looking to buy Nintendo being more of an entertainment company than just a video game company, and their plans for next generation with the account system and backwards compatibility. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.